I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I hope you're doing well today, but if you're not, we want to bring you some encouragement today. Because I understand, life can be very, very difficult at times. Things happen that you don't understand, and it just sometimes doesn't seem right. And when you're having one of those days or weeks or months or even years, it's easy to say, God, where are you? And I think he's okay with that. I actually think he wants you to ask that question. God, where are you? Because as Scripture promises, when we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. You're going to hear from a woman who has faced a lot of difficult days, and she'll tell you about that. But she has a book where she talks about some of the things that she has experienced and observed and learned. Now, the book is called Even When. And it's one of those testimonies that's difficult, raises, frankly, a lot of questions. But if you're facing those types of situations, I do believe it will bring you great encouragement. Sara Cormany is the author of that book, and she joins me right now. We appreciate you guys being here. If you know someone who's going through a difficult time, hit that share button and say, hey, I think this will encourage you. Sara, how are you doing today? Is this a good day for you?
Today is a beautiful day. I'm doing very, very well, and I'm so happy to be here.
Well, walk us through a little bit of your story so people can understand what you've been through and why you would ask some of these questions.
25 years ago, I began what I like to call a horrible, wonderful, beautiful dance with chronic illness. And at the time I was his, I knew that I was held by God, but life had pretty much gone according to my own plan. I was a teacher, a speech educator, and I really honestly believed that was going to be the story of my life, how I was going to serve him from that point on until eternity. But when my husband and I got married, by the end of our first year together, I had to walk away from the classroom. I had a lot of symptoms, a lot of things going wrong with my body, but doctors couldn't figure out why. So for the first 8 years of our marriage, we definitely felt like every piece was touched by my health. But it wasn't until 2011 when my youngest at the time, our third baby, was 4 months old, that I had a stroke. And an illness that had been very life-impacting switched over to life-threatening. And I had to come to terms with that not only did I have to trust him with my days, but I also had to trust him with my life.
Where were you? You were a Christian, so you had that foundation. Was it shaken at all during that time?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, there are some folks who I wanted to be a writer since I was 2 years old and I opened my first book. That was not the dream for my life. But when I had my stroke, I was still pretty involved in ministry and was on a leadership team for a MOPS group. And one of our meetings that the moms loved, it was just a time to share, again, testimony of what God was doing in our life. But it was 6 weeks after my stroke, and somebody backed out at the last minute. And the old Sara could have just got up on stage and start talking without even a second thought. But I experienced every public speaking nightmare you can possibly imagine. My mouth got all cotton mouthed. I was shaking. My voice was shaking. My body. I had notes, but I was lost. And I got off the stage and I called my husband and I said, I am never going back onto the stage again.
I'm sorry.
Isn't that?
I'm laughing. How many times have you been back on the stage since then?
Oh, a ton, right? God's like, yeah, we'll see. But that's what drove me to the page.
Ah,
That's what drove me to start writing, was because I no longer felt safe. I no longer felt comfortable communicating on a stage or even with the spoken word. But how beautiful was it? It became my way back to the goodness of God. It brought me from the life was a mess. I was angry. I was sad. I was confused. I felt hopeless at times because here I had these three young kids and I didn't know how the story was going to end
mhm.
or even if I would see the milestones that I thought I had been promised. But wow, what a and it's been a beautiful one.
Now, were you suffering from physical impact of the stroke when you were trying to
Absolutely.
speak? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I didn't have any true speech deficit, but
Okay.
processing, oftentimes my kids would laugh. I'd be like, guys, it's time to get in the basement. And they're like, Mom, did you mean the car? Yes, that's what I meant.
Mhm.
So, those kind of things, processing and then being able to verbalize thoughts was very challenging for me. And of course, therapy helped with that and time helped with that. But I do have a wonky left side. I walk with a cane and deal with a lot of fatigue and just weakness in my body. But can I just tell you what a trip that was with three small children and a cane?
Mhm.
You can't stay stuck in sadness too long because it's absolutely hilarious. Goodness, for the first probably 5 years when they were the youngest, we were like a walking show, like a theater production. It was like, oh, look at this woman with these three children climbing walls. And my son actually climbed a wall. It was during a church activity. And I physically was incapable of being the kind of mom that prior to the stroke, I expected, again, that expectation
Mhm.
that I expected to be. But if you will indulge me a little bit, let me tell a story that I think puts that into
Yeah. Sure.
perspective. I was walking down the stairs, and this was probably 4 or 5 years after my stroke. And I heard my kids talking, and they were of the age where you're always so glad that they're getting along. And even moreover, you're also really glad they're not destroying the house. So
Right.
I kind of slowed down to see what it was they were talking about. And my oldest says, I tell them she's Dory. And then my son said, I do the same thing when people ask what's wrong with mom. I tell them she's Dory. And they were referencing Dory from the movie Finding Nemo, the
Oh,
little fish
okay.
that lost her memory and forgets 10 seconds later what she said. And I had this kind of aha moment where God really pressed this into my heart. First, He pressed into my heart the courage those kids had to have a mom that wasn't like any other moms they knew.
Mhm.
Gave me a window out of my own junk into the walk that my kids were having to take because of our hard stuff. But the second thing it did for me was it really just wrote across my life. I don't have to be a perfect mom
Mhm.
to be a good mom.
Mhm.
And I don't have to have a perfect life to know and experience a good God.
That's powerful, and I think um, it's true. And you seem to have a good grasp on it. Um, is this something that you've just held to, or is this something that took a while to really get down deep in your soul?
I I have held to, and I'll be completely honest with you, the reason I have held to is because it didn't stop there. You know, we are actually walking through one of the hardest seasons of our life right now. And even my kids have said it. And there's a lot that I can't share publicly. But what I can say is that when you live in a place and you return to a place over and over again where you have to literally face plant, me kind of figuratively because I'm a fall risk, but when you have to face plant at the feet of Jesus year after year, day after day, breath after breath, there is a comfort there. And I think in the lighter seasons of our life, I've almost missed it. I've almost craved it because he's all I have. And that's the gift. That's the goodness. We were given the best we could have ever been given from God, and that's his son. And I think in our first world excess mentality, we miss that so very often. We have the best.
A lot of people, like you mentioned, in our culture especially, would look at losing everything or having that type of dependency as almost as a curse, or and someone would say just a result of the fallen world, or a lot of different things. Why do you view that as a positive thing?
I don't think the hard stuff is very much fun, let me tell you honestly. And I want anybody who's listening to hear me very clearly. I get angry, I get fussy, I get overwhelmed, I get broken, but I also have experienced fully that he will take me where I am, no matter what brokenness I am experiencing, and he will sit with me in it. And he has done that practically through friends who have walked into every messy piece. When you come home from the hospital after 4 days and realize that your best friends walked into your mess, literally and figuratively, and cleaned your toilets, that is humbling. But it also gives you a taste of God's. It says, hey, I know you can't feel me right now, but I'm going to give you people to walk alongside you that will make you believe I love you and I'm there with you and I'm present with you. It doesn't remove the fact that all the stuff is awful. It just, his presence in the middle of it makes it bearable. And it also gives us the gift. And I was talking to one of my sweet chronic illness friends. She's a polio survivor. And we were talking about the hope of heaven. This life was never meant to be as good as it gets. This life was a stopping point for us to share the hope that we have as Jesus followers. But our expectation, our just absolute looking forward to amazing things, that's an eternity. I cannot wait to ditch that cane and just run into the arms of Jesus. But I would not have that perspective if I was Sara 25 years ago. 25 years ago, all my dreams would have had to come true in this lifetime for me to have experienced him fully. But the beauty of brokenness is that it takes you on a journey where you're like, yeah, this life is hard, but you know what? The best is yet to be.
Yeah, as a writer, you're familiar with the prologue of a book, and sometimes it can just be a couple of pages in front of several hundred pages. And this life is the prologue. It's not the story. It's a setup, I think. And if we think that you read the prologue to, I don't know, War and Peace, and then we know the book, we don't have a clue. Right.
Right.
So let me ask you this: have you ever gotten confirmed diagnosis of the chronic disease or diseases that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I have an autoimmune disease, actually several, fibromyalgia, Sjogren's, and then I have a connective tissue disease that hasn't differentiated, but has functioned a lot like lupus. I've had blood clots. I've had multiple septic infections. So I think, again, that's another thing is when you have life-threatening after life-threatening experience and you get to stay. Like one of my friends was like, Sara, and this was important for me because I think at the moment where she said it, I was kind of like, I was wallowing. I was like, she's like, Sara, you have a purpose. If God has kept you here over and over and over again, there is a reason for that. And that spoke volumes to me and encouraged me so profoundly. We want healing on our own terms, but the healing that I have experienced, even in my illness, is miraculous. And sometimes when we lose our plan, we miss the miracles that are being wrought in our life.
Yeah. Have you kept count to know how many times, it's been a life or death situation? How many times your friends have had to pray not knowing the outcome?
So I had a pulmonary embolism that actually ended up not being treated. And so I should have been out of this world there. There was the stroke. Then I've had a septic miscarriage where I coded on the table and woke up on a ventilator in the ICU. And then I had two, like within 6 months of each other, bouts of septic pneumonia. So again, when you get to that place over and over and over again, what healing God has given me. But if I focus on the junk part, if I focus on not having a life like the person comparison, that's something else that kills us. Looking to my right and to my left and saying, well, I didn't get what they got, so I'm pretty mad about it. But if we focus on what's in front of us, then there's so much perspective and there's so much freedom there.
Yeah. So, that type of thing typically, and it should focus us on the things that actually matter. I mean,
Yep.
have you had a very serious perspective adjustment as to what's important and what's not?
For sure. For sure. And I think it also, do you know what? The other thing, and I think people don't get this either unless you've been in the middle of just really tough situations. It also gives you an appreciation for how funny like life can be and just having a sense of humor and being okay to laugh about it. My daddy, he's home with Jesus. He passed away in 2014. And he actually passed away 6 weeks before our miracle baby, after the septic miscarriage was scheduled to be born via C-section. And we were sitting there. My mom we were trying to get things just, it was a very unexpected death, a brain aneurysm that took him almost immediately. And so the weeks following were just chaotic and just a mess. But my mom was really worried. She knew I had health problems. And so the mama bear in her is coming out even as she's grieving. And so I literally had to sit in the chair, and my job was to call people. So it wasn't terribly impressive. But my siblings, when siblings get together, we laugh, we cut up, we think life is so hilarious and nobody else gets our jokes. So they were being really, really loud, and it was post-stroke. So when there's lots of noise, I get my words jumbled. And I'm talking he was an organ donor. I'm talking to the organ donation people. And I say, I get the impression you're wanting to talk to the organ donor. No. And so there go my siblings, snort laughing to the floor. Sarah, in the world. But God gave us laughter, and it's okay to laugh in the middle of it. So, yes, focus on the person in front of you. Focus on who God has for you to love today, whether that's your family or it's the person in the grocery store or the guy across from you on the Zoom screen. Focus on the people brought in your wake. And don't get so hung up that life has to be so serious all the time. Laugh, because I think it was Irma Bombeck said, laughter rewards us for our courage through hard things. And that's so true. Embrace that gift for those of you out there who are in unimaginable situations. It's okay to laugh and just have that relief in the middle of the mess.
We're talking to Sara Cormany. Her book is available now. It's called Even When, and you can visit her at saracormany.com. It's Sara with no H. If you're listening, Sara Cormany, CORMANY.com. That's for you guys that are just listening to the audio portion of the podcast. So now you have 4 children, is that right?
I do.
What's the age range there?
My oldest is 18. We just took her all the way to Philly for college.
Oh, boy.
And then, oh gosh, now I'm going to have to remember how old my children are.
Just guess. That's what I do.
Just guess. That's right. It's kind of like when you call them every name of every child in the house and then the dog's name, and you're like, I'm so sorry I didn't get your name right the first time. But my son is 16, so he's a junior in high school. And then I have a 14-year-old, and our baby, our miracle Maddie, is 10. So life is full.
Yeah. This is a very busy time. And you, how long have you been married? I'm just trying to set up the situation.
You're going to have me do math again.
No, that's okay. What year?
See,
do you remember?
2002. So
2002.
what, 23?
Okay. So
almost
that's
23
good.
years?
That's good.
Yeah.
So I asked that because I'm curious. I mean, in a weird way, sometimes when we go through difficult health situations like that, and even when we maintain a sense of humor, I've been there, not life or death, but rough times. And I'm calm, I'm cool. I'm like, I'm going to get through this. My family wasn't as convinced as I was. How has this impacted your husband and your kids?
I think this is that was a hard question. but I think it's an important one.
Yeah.
There's no rule book on how to raise 4 small children when your body's falling apart and you're in a life and death situation over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, the things that were forged in them, the trauma that they experienced as young kids, we are just now seeing a lot of those repercussions. And that is hard to see. It's hard to walk through. But, I have also seen such beautiful things forged in them. Compassion, kindness, the willingness to go with the flow and flex because they know that they have to every single day. This is a great story because it totally explains their hearts. We just got a used car, like 11 years old, but it's new to us. And every single one of them was like, thanks, Mom and Dad. There is a gratitude that I know I didn't have at that age.
Yeah.
And I think they also they didn't think their mom was necessarily going to be around.
Right.
I walked away from campus when we dropped our daughter off at school, and I started crying, but it wasn't because I was leaving her. It was because I got to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And that in the middle of what's already arguably a hard time in parenthood was so profound. And it really switched my perspective that, Sara, you don't have to, you get to.
Yeah. if it's any consolation, my wife cried for the whole hour and a half after dropping off our first daughter at college all the way home, and she had no other issues going on. So it's very,
Yes.
very normal.
We talked to one of our kids' teachers right before we left to drop her off, and she's like, "Oh, that's going to be the Trail of Tears."
Yep.
And I was like, "Okay, well, at
Well,
least I'm warned." But
Well, I mean, and your child is becoming an adult, and they're out there on out from under your house. It's a whole thing, but it's fine. It's good, you know.
yep. Yep.
And
It's hard and good.
yeah, and then you drop off the son, and he's like, "Okay, thanks, Mom and Dad. We'll see you later. Go ahead and leave." And you're like, "Well, that's different from the daughter." Okay, but
Yep, exactly. What? I need a pillow. I need a towel. I'm fine.
right,
Mhm.
right.
Yep.
It is funny. I mean, it is hard at times, but it is funny. Here's a truth that I think we as Christians will say we know, but it's a hard one at times. And the setup would be you love your kids, yes,
Yes.
100%. And the truth is that God loves them even more than we're capable to. We love them fully, but His love fully is so much more. And I mean, you know, my younger sister passed away at 40. She had 3 young kids. She fought cancer for 7 years. And that was the hardest time was not actually the funeral or seeing her for the last time in the hospital. Those were awful. But it was at her oldest son's wedding that it hit me the hardest, because I thought, she's not here to see it, and she would want to be. And I had to leave the reception, you know, got to leave the hotel where it was at, go stand on the street. And I just felt like God was saying, I know it's hard, but I've got those kids in my hand. I love them more than any of you are even capable of. It's not to say you don't love them, you do. But His love is so much deeper, and His grace is so much stronger. And I know you know that, but does that hit you at times? Is that a reality to you, or is it, I mean, it's hard. I get it. I'm just curious.
No, I almost struggle to even say this, but I think the gift of losing my daddy at the time in which I lost him is that I've seen how even in the missing of him, even at my daughter's graduation, and it broke my heart
Right.
to watch all these kids with their grandpas. Just broke me, because you're right. Those are the moments that you feel the loss most keenly.
Yeah.
But I've also seen His love written over all of our lives. And I think that is the piece where, as the mom who I still wonder, I mean, shoot, my dad, no expectation that he was not going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
But that if I love well and I show up and I'm a part of their lives in a way God has called me to be a part of their lives, even when I'm gone, my love is going to stay behind.
See, that's, you know, legacy is what we would say, and from a spiritual standpoint, it means even more.
Absolutely.
How do you want your kids to describe you? This sounds terrible.
It's not terrible.
Yeah, how do you want them to remember you? Whatever. I mean, even if you live to 100 and they're in their, I don't know, 70s or 80s, how do you want them to remember you?
I hope that they remember that I was a hot mess. And the reason I hope that they remember and I honestly, I don't even have to hope here. I mean, they know. But that even in that messiness, I showed up.
Yeah.
And I loved them well. And
Yeah.
I loved them with all I had. And that I showed them in some small way, Jesus. because that's it.
That,
I mean, really, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's it.
and that's all there needs to be. That's
Yeah.
enough. That's enough. All right. I'll lighten this up a little bit. What are you? What do you enjoy? I mean, because here's the other thing is like, okay, so I broke my face a few years ago. I was in the hospital for a week, recovered, soft foods, all that kind of mess. Couldn't get out and do things. And it wasn't that long, but it was still, God, I mean, like a week seems like forever when you can't chew,
Oh, yeah.
What do you enjoy?
I would like to say it's super complicated, but it really isn't. The last couple of weeks, we had, I think it's the back to school crud everybody gets because all the germs are all together again.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we all know. As parents, we all know. Or teachers, they also know. But I had been stuck at the house, and I think that's something that when you have a chronic illness, everything hits you harder. So isolation is one of those things where you're like, for the love of Pete, could I just not look at these four walls? And I told my husband, I was like, I want to go to the apple orchard. Let's go to the apple orchard. And it really is that simple to watch my kids have a good day and just enjoy things with them. I know that sounds very boring, but I think it's the grace of a rewritten life where you're just like, it doesn't have to be fancy, or it's just the people that you love most in the world, spending time with them.
Well, I mean, again, when you go through things like that, it strips down a lot of the junk and gets down to the core, and that's the core is
Yeah.
enjoying God's creation and sharing it with other people. I mean, when that's enough, you find life actually is a lot richer than a lot of people who have everything.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you have a chronic disease, you don't have money. I can just let you know that for certain. So you really do. What is life about? What is life about? It's about the people and the lives that you touch along the way. So
Yeah.
for me, that doesn't mean that I don't have short-term memory loss sometimes and stamp my foot and like, I would really like XYZ. But when I boil it down, that's really what I enjoy the most.
Does it allow you to get to a place where even with all the difficulties, you can say, yeah, life is good?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A wonky body is really not that bad. And, hey, get handicap parking, primo parking. That's great. I also, I have some fancy canes so that, I can class it up and be fashionable at the same time. And, that's really have fun with life. Life is too short for it to be boring. Just have fun and embrace all God has for you.
I'm guessing that that's a message that resonates with other people that are suffering from chronic disease, because they'll listen to you like they won't listen to people who haven't been there. What hope would you offer to someone who's struggling right now, maybe with some sort of physical limitation that they don't understand, they don't like, and they're just looking for some ray of hope?
Going back to that idea that for those folks who deal with chronic illness, isolation is very hard. I think that I would say to anybody out there who's having a bad day or having a rough stretch that you are not alone. I think that's why I wrote the book. Ultimately, it was not because I had these really amazing things I thought I could say. It was just my story. If that can help somebody else remember that they're not the only one, that God is still good and he still loves them recklessly, that is also enough.
If you're one that needed to hear that, I hope you hear that today. If you want some encouragement, check out the book, Even When. And I mean, if you can't afford it, just tell a friend, hey, I'd really like this book. And somebody will buy it for you. But mostly it's not about selling the books. It's about hearing Sara's heart and understanding what she's been through and faces. Sara, I really appreciate not just your testimony, which I do appreciate, I appreciate your attitude. You're a ray of sunshine.
Oh, thank you.
And I do.
I would like to say it's me. I don't think it is. I think I'm weak. And in weakness, his grace shines best. And so anything you see there is that, I'm sure.
Well, keep shining on.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate all you guys out there watching. If you know somebody that's having a difficult day, maybe many in a row, do hit that share button. Encourage them today. And if you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed, I do invite you to do that. You'll get more notifications of encouraging interviews like this. And you can check out Sara right there at saracormany.com. It looks like that. And the book is available wherever you get books. Appreciate you guys being here. We'll see you again next time online.